Sherry Turkle. I teach at MIT, and I study how people in digital technology get along. I've become a lot more skeptical, in fact, because there was something I didn't see. And what I didn't see and what I didn't predict is that we would have these devices always on and always on us in a way where our attention would always be divided and we would always be tempted to essentially bail out of the human relationships that we were in, to go into our devices, to go into the world that we're in our phones.
That was the voice of author and 30-year veteran professor from MIT, Sherry Turkle. You know, Sherry and a growing number of people are becoming increasingly convinced things just aren't the way they're supposed to be between us as people, and especially when it comes to why we seem to expect more from our technology and less from each other. Hi, I'm Fran, and I direct a small faith-based nonprofit committed to biblical integrity, cultural relevance, and just helping people understand what shalom is, where it went, and what it takes to get it back. Each week, we explore all this as we journey on our road to shalom. This week, we're headed into a labyrinth, our transparent relationship with mobile technology and social media. And we're going to look especially at how it's changing us as people. This week and next week, we're going to sit in the back row at a gathering of about 500 college students from a dozen colleges in 5 states and listen in on this notion of recovering our personhood in an age of machines. Here we go. I'm asking you this weekend that you trust me until I disqualify myself, until I say something that's not true, until I say something that you know is not true. Because here's what you got to know. The time is short. Stakes are high. I care deeply about you. I care deeply about your generation. And so I'm going to tell you the truth this weekend. I'm going to do it in a way that's full of mercy and love and compassion. My reason is because I want you to carry the gospel into the next generation. And so you're the future. You are the future of the gospel. You're the future of the church. You are my Obi-Wan Kenobi. You are our only hope. And so we're going to spend some time this weekend looking at a subject that a lot of folks don't want to talk about, and has to do with technology. I have studied this a fair amount. I've studied it for about 25 years, but I really mean this. I'm not an expert. I'm not against technology. I've got an RF transmitter in my hand. I've got an MP3 recorder in my hip pocket. I'm using a Mac that's as old as I am, but I've kept it alive. And I was on a Mac when System 4, I'm not joking, in 1985 was my first Mac. And so I've been involved in it. We're not going to have an altar call on Sunday morning and have you all come up and burn your smartphones. We're not going to do that. At least that's not part of my plan, but that could happen. But tonight we're going into the dark. We're going into the world of the world. I'm not going to quote much scripture. I'm not going to unpack many Greek verbs and all that sort of stuff that I love to do. We're not going to go there. We're going to listen to what the world has to say about itself from really smart people. And we're going to start out tonight. I'm going to lay some foundations. But one of the most unasked questions I think that there is, it's unasked by everybody, not just us as believers. Now, let me qualify that. I came to faith 48 years ago when I was your age on a college campus in Wisconsin. I had hair out to here. I weighed about 80 pounds. I looked like a Tootsie Pop. And I was in the drug culture, I was in the counterculture. I was as lost as can be. Some of you have hurt so much before you got to college, and no one knows about it. My goal is the same. On Sunday morning when we leave here, you'll leave here with an informed understanding, and you'd be in a better place to chart the trajectory for your life. Okay, but one of the most unanswered or unasked questions probably that there is, and it's one that you and I are going to look at tonight, who am I listening to? In other words, who has my ear? You know, there's a verse in the first Psalm that says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, or sits in the seat of mockers, or stands in the way of sinners." Who has my ear? Who am I listening to? Who's shaping my values? Who's telling me what's important? Who's telling me what's not important? Who's telling me what's good and harmful? Who's telling me what's beneficial? Who's telling me how to set my life in a direction? Where are you getting your guidance? Is life a choose your own adventure? Do you get to pick how it ends? Do you get to pick who's in it? And so on. And there's a whole bunch of places you can get it. You can be listening to social media, which is really what others think about you and think about me, and which is based mostly on what I put out there or what you put out there. So we're kind of in charge of what other people think about us, or so we think we are, all right? And there's so many promises. There's so many different avenues where social media can speak for me. I can be a viral sensation. I can have 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 followers. I can have 500,000 views on whatever. And I can develop a sense of celebrityism. And so my understanding of who I am as a person then comes from what other people say about me. There's other kinds of other people too. There's researchers. Who are you and I going to listen to when it comes to who we are as people? There's a whole variety of people out there, my age and younger, that are studying generations. They're studying you. And they take birth years. And they say the things that characterize people that belong in those birth years, that were born in those birth years. And there's a big debate on what to call you guys. Are you Generation Z? Are you iGen? Between you and me, I think Generation Z is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. I mean, where do you go from there? AA? That sounds like a battery, you know? But the statistics, the research on you says that you are a fearful generation. That safety is your prime concern. That sex and pregnancy and all that stuff is down in your generation because you don't want to take the risk. Now here's what I want to ask you, and I want you to listen to my heart here. How long are you going to let a bunch of adults, people like me, who do research, or a handful of social media conglomerates tell you who you are? How long are you going to let your private information be taken and then sold to marketers so they can take your money? When are you going to push back and say, that's not who I am? That's not who I am. I am not what you say everyone else is. I want you to have a sense of identity that's strong enough to carry you all the way till you breathe your last breath. And as an old guy who's at the end of time, I've come to understand that it's really important which voices I listen to. And there's a really old guy. I mean, he's been dead so long, he's really dead. His name was John the Baptizer. We're talking 30 AD. And we can learn a lesson from him. He wasn't really a Baptist. If you grew up in a Baptist church and you were told that he was a Baptist, everyone wants to claim him. That he wasn't a Presbyterian either, right? Because we know he dunked people, so he didn't drizzle, so we know he was, But he wasn't a Baptist. He was a baptizer. That's what he did. But one of the most important statements he made had to do with, there's a verse in the Gospel of John. It says, when the Jews from Jerusalem sent scribes and Pharisees to John on the other side of the Jordan to ask him, they said, who are you? Are you the Christ? He said, They said, well, are you Elijah? He said, no. They said, well, are you the prophet that Moses talked about in the book of Deuteronomy? He said, I'm not. And they said, well, who are you? We need to give an answer to those who sent us. What do you say about yourself? And he said, I'm the voice of one crying in the wilderness. Now, the point here, beloved, the point here is that sometimes you have to know who or what you're not before you can figure out who or what you are. And the first thing I want to tell you, as an advocate, as someone who's in your balcony, as someone who cares about you, you are not a topic. You are not a demographic. You are not a subject. You are not a piece of art to be hung up on a wall and say, well, what do you think about that generation? You're more than that. And we're going to talk about personhood. And we're going to take these labels that have been put on us and my generation. I'm a baby boomer, according to their birth dates. My oldest son is Gen X. I've got a couple kids that are in this millennial group. But we're going to get rid of that. We're going to cross that out. But in order to do that, I'm going to tell you this. I want you to look up here. I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to step on your toes a little bit this weekend. So we're going to take a look at this. And one of the first things we got to do, beloved, one of the first things we got to do is we got to face some truths. We got to get our heads out of the sand about some things. And I'm going to lay these out. And we're not even setting the table yet for what we're going to talk about tonight. But one of the first things, we got to admit this. I may be really aware of how technology is changing and be totally blind to how it's changing me. I may be the most savvy guy on the processing chip in the new iPhone. And I may be totally in touch with how technology is changing and not have a clue how it's changing me. And it is. It has. 26 years ago, beloved, when I started studying this, there was kind of a lone voice out there. His name was Neil Postman. He's written a couple books. We're going to look at them tonight. 26 years later, it's turned into a chorus of people that are speaking out. They're like John the Baptizer, and they want us to pay attention. And I want you to pay attention. Now, you're big people. I'm not going to tell you what to think, but I am going to push you to learn how to think about some of this stuff. Okay? And what does this have to do with God, of all things? What does my smartphone have to do with God? So that's the first one. Second one, being cautious about technology is a sign of wisdom, not regression, not going backwards, just being cautious. You know, if you walk into the Apple store in Birmingham, Alabama, where I live, it's one of the top-selling Apple stores in the country. If you walk into the Apple store there, they'll tell you what it will do for you. Matter of fact, I would give you this as an assignment. You go into a tech store, whether it's Best Buy, Apple Store, whatever, and they say, well, this will do this, this will do this, this will do this. Ask them 3 questions. Say, well, that's really good to know. Could I ask you 3 questions? Okay. All right. What will it do to me? What will it take from me? And what will it require of me? Just ask them. And you will see a very chatty salesperson, all the blood will drain to their shoes. They don't have an answer for that. And I didn't come up with those questions. I did not come up with those questions. Neil Postman did. So this isn't the ravings of some conservative pastor. This is a communications professor at the University of New York. And one of the best on the planet. He's gone now. He's dead. It's a sign of wisdom, not regression. Here's a verse that's worth memorizing. In Proverbs 4:23, it says this. It says, above all else, guard your heart, for from it flow the springs of life. Guard your heart. Pay attention to your heart. The word guard doesn't mean lock it up. It means watch it. Watch your heart. Why? From it flow the springs of life. Let me put that in 21st century kind of street language. God is saying, pay attention to what you're becoming. Pay attention to what you're becoming. That's a sign of wisdom. That's not a sign of regression. And let me put a New Testament spin on that. 1 Thessalonians 5:20. Paul says this. He says, test everything. Hold fast to what is good and abstain from every form of evil. Test everything. It's a beautiful, beautiful Greek verb. It's the verb dokimazo. And dokimazo was the work of the silversmith. Dokimazo was when a silversmith put the silver ore in a crucible and cranked up the heat and got it to melt, and then he would skim off the crud. He'd crank the heat up and skim off the crud. He'd crank the heat up, skim off the crud, keep doing that and doing that and doing that until there was no more crud to scrape off. And then he'd look over the crucible and he'd see his reflection in it. All right? That's silver was dokimazo. It was tested by fire and it was proven to be pure. All right? And this is off the subject, that's part of what God wants to do with you. Beautiful verse in Proverbs. It says, take away the dross, the junk, take away the dross from the silver, and the smith has material for a vessel. God wants to do that with you. He wants you to be a useful vessel. That's wisdom. Testing things is wisdom. It's not regression. Being cautious is not a bad thing. I get my undies get in a total bundle over this. You know, just the way Christians embrace stuff. If it's faster and it's more efficient and it's not pornography and it's not evil, then we should have it. And we don't step back and say, don't know. What will it take from us? What will it do to us? How will I be different if I have this? Next one, paying attention to what I'm becoming, which we just talked about, is essential for self-preservation, not self-promotion. Paying attention to myself. What are my values? How do I spend my money? What do I think of people? How much time do I spend with people? What do I spend my time on? How do my career goals fit in with the kingdom of God? That's important for self-preservation, not just self-promotion. Next one, and this is a heavy one. I could talk to you all night on this, but information is the new currency. It's the new currency. He who has the most information has the most power, has the most influence, has the most people paying attention to him. But it's 3 steps away from wisdom. What do I mean information is 3 steps away from wisdom? Information is virtual. It can be digitized. It doesn't have any existence of its own. All right? There's information. Let me do it this way for you guys, left to right. If there's information, then there's knowledge, and then there's wisdom. Okay? Information is virtual. Knowledge is residential. Knowledge is residential. It's got to be here. It's got to be here. Wisdom is incarnational. It's experiential. It has to do with my interactions with people. So let me tell you, if you have a sudden situation, you can go online and look up WebMD, you can look up all this stuff online, you can find out all kinds of things about pediatric oncology. You can find out everything you need to know about pediatric oncology. But if your 4-year-old son is diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia that only 30 kids in America have, you can gain some knowledge. Take that information and figure out some things. But you can't. You need wisdom for that. You can't get a kidney on Craigslist. And you guys are absolutely saturated with information. There's a book out called Data Smog, The New Form of Pollution. And when I sat in the classroom, I taught people your age for 25 years. All right? So I've been doing this a while. And I've watched the change take place in my classroom where knowing something went from owning it to knowing where to find it and how to get to it. And I'm telling you as Christians, if you are, if you're not, this is still important. I'm not sure what's coming, but I don't think it's good for us as believers. I think the party's almost over. But you're going to need to know God. And you're going to need to know how to walk with Him in wisdom. He who trusts in his own mind is a fool, but he who walks in wisdom will be delivered. I implore you to resurrect your semantic memory and start storing away knowledge so that you can learn how to relate to people and how to minister to people and how to live life. The best modern parable on what happens when we lose wisdom and lose knowledge and depend completely on technology. The best one I've seen in my lifetime is the Book of Eli. It's a powerful story about what happens when a sophisticated culture loses its electricity. All right. This is a big one to me as an educator. And I want you to understand this, that information will not get you through a crisis. It might help you find the nearest gas station, but it won't help you when your spouse is diagnosed with breast cancer or your child is diagnosed with something else. We're in serious trouble. We are in serious trouble when God has to speak through the culture more clearly because His people aren't listening. His people are distracted. And this isn't me talking. This is Isaiah 700 years before Jesus, and then the Apostle Paul around 50 AD quoting Isaiah, and he makes this statement. He says, "The Lord, in the law it's written, by people of strange tongues and by the lips of foreigners I will speak to this people, and even then they will not listen to me. I've spoken to my people, and they did not listen. I will raise up foreigners outside the community of faith to speak to my people, and they still won't listen." And when God starts speaking more clearly through the secular culture than He does through the church, we are in deep doo-doo. And that's kind of where we are. And so I want us to pay attention, because these really smart people are saying something that a beautiful blonde said at the beginning of a wonderful film. I think Treebeard really said this in the books, but that doesn't play as well as Galadriel. She said the world has changed. She said, I feel it in the earth, I feel it in the water, I smell it in the air. Much that once was is lost, and none now live who remember it. And what I want to do, this is going to seem a little academic, but it's not. We're going to take a whirlwind tour way back, and we're going to start out with the creation of the human race. But God created man in His own likeness. We're going to spend a great deal of time talking about this tomorrow. But God was a talking God. 300 times, beloved, in the Old Testament, there's references to God talking and God speaking. 50 times alone in the book of Genesis, God speaking, God speaking, God speaking. He's in a face-to-face, some kind of face-to-face speaking relationship with this couple. All right? So we're created in the likeness of a God who talks. A conversational God. We'll jump way ahead, literally way ahead, to about 400 BC, and all of a sudden we go from kind of being an oral culture to the very beginnings of being a text-based culture. And the Ionic alphabet is developed, so the alphabet you and I use is based pretty much on this, all right? Then you jump ahead 1,800 years, and you get to Gutenberg and movable type, and pretty soon we start getting the basis of a literate culture. And so now we start having conversation without words. We have conversation without words. Then you jump ahead about another, 400 years, and all of a sudden we got the beginning of texting. A guy named Samuel Morse invents a thing called the telegraph, and they use Morse code, which is kind of like texting with the flip phone, all right? So they They invent Morse code, and the day that the last stretch of telegraph cable was stretched from New York to California, the day that it was completed, the Pony Express went out of business. One technology replaced another on the basis of what? Speed and efficiency. Speed and efficiency can cover great distances over shorter periods of time. We want that. We want that. And then a few years later, a guy named Alexander Graham Bell invents this thing called telephone. And don't get me wrong, I'm not blowing smoke here. This guy right here is really the beginning of everything we depend on. It was the explosion of the phone system that laid the foundation for everything that we use now in terms of the internet. So now we have words without presence. You can hear voices, but there's no people. We have dialogue from a distance. I'm going to get a little heavy here. 1932, a guy named Aldous Huxley wrote a book, and there's a reason for I'm putting this in here. 1932, he wrote a book called Brave New World, and it's a dystopian novel about the future, all right, not too future, because it was 2054, it's only 36 years from now. He wrote this fiction about this culture, about this world, and everyone in it was happy and distracted because the powers that be were feeding them a drug called Soma, all right? Now just file this away. It's important in a minute. That was Brave New World, Aldous Huxley, 1932. In 1946, RCA kind of went mainstream with a black and white television. And pretty soon people are, for the first time, in their private worlds, for the first time people are interacting with a screen. And if you looked at the living room couches of a lot of American families, most American families, there was a kind of a white glow coming off their faces. Does that sound familiar? And they popularized this. 1946. 1949, a guy named George Orwell wrote a book called 1984. And in it there was a person called Big Brother. And he was the head of a thing called the Party. And it was illegal and wrong to be an individual. They had a group called the Thought Police, and their whole job in 1984, in this book, 1984 by Orwell, was to find people that were trying to be individuals and squash them. They were committed to making everyone conform to the same standard in 1984, in his book. Something happened in 1973. I debated about putting this in, but I think it's really, really important. In 1973, personhood was separated from humanity. Personhood, being considered a person, was separated from being a human being. It was no longer a part of your nature. All right, there was a decision, January 22nd, 1973, called Roe v. Wade. And that was the whole basis of the abortion industry and all that. And I'm not going there. But if you look through, and I've read through it, I have it on my computer. If you look through Justice Blackmun's summary judgments on Roe versus Wade, he uses the word person and personhood 11 times in the last 3 paragraphs. And the closing statement in Roe versus Wade is this: that an unborn fetus has never had protection and been considered a person under the law. Now, where am I getting at? I'm getting at this, and I think it's important, is that in 1973, being a something and being a someone were separated. And so you were not inherently a person by fact of just being a human being. Someone had to ascribe that to you. Society would tell you when you were a person. And there's a tremendous irony to this. And I'm not getting political here. I want you to understand there's been a slow erosion of what it means to be a person, what it really means to be a human. That same year, the bald eagle was put on the endangered species list. It had been on a different list in the 60s. Was put on the endangered species list. If you crushed a bald eagle's egg, you went to prison. Because what was assumed was what was in utero was in reality. But they denied that to people. And so personhood is something that has to be ascribed. And Richard Dawkins and a number of scientists, some of you that are in the scientific community already know this, but there's a whole movement on right now called Great Ape Personhood Project. They want to ascribe personhood to chimpanzees and great apes because then they'll be legally protected. All right? No, there's all kinds of political ramifications, and push that aside. This is not a political statement. This is a statement about an assault on what it means to be a person. And much of the struggle that people are having, your age, depression and suicide and all kinds of stuff, we're trying to find some sense of who we are in the midst of a sea of confusion. 1979, Sony came out with a thing called the Walkman. Your parents probably had one. You put these little cassette tapes, there's these little plastic things that have these little rolls in them that have tape in them. They're kind of like these big flat vinyl things that look like pizzas that we had when I was a kid that we used to play music on. Although they've gotten to be sexy again. But you put the put the cassette tape in this thing and you could walk around and you had a little set of headphones on, more or less. They certainly were not Beats, but they were headphones. And you could take your music with you. Mobility and entertainment all of a sudden became available. All right? 1984, a young computer guy, a real smart guy named Steve Jobs, unveiled something that he thought was going to be tremendous. He had a penchant, he had a passion for individuality and individualism, had a hostility towards conformity and uniformity. And he believed that he was going to deliver people. Now listen to me, I'm not playing games here. He believed he was going to deliver people from a life staring at a screen, which was a TV, in 1984. And so they did something. During the Super Bowl commercial in 1984.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
There's a great deal of irony there. A great deal of irony. To be delivered from a life of staring at screens and be conformists. So that came out in 1984. 1985, Neil Postman released a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death, and it had to do with America's obsession with television. 1990, a young guy named Tim Berners-Lee invented a computer language called HTML, and everything that you and I are messing with in terms of web pages with text and images is a result of his work. 1995, a young guy, 31 years old, invented or launched a company called Amazon. Sell a few things, mail them to people, no big deal. It's one of the biggest conglomerates in the world right now. Owns the Washington Post. It owns Whole Foods. It owns Twitch. 1995, 27-year-old guy launches eBay. 1996, if you're a senior, somewhere in there, you were born in here. But the class of 2019 is born here. When you're 2 years old, Sergey Brin and Larry Page launched this search engine competing with Yahoo called Google. When you're 3 years old, a Japanese artist invents this thing called emojis. They were called emoticons at the time. And we have the launch really of moving to a texting culture. And it's no surprise that the very next year, Research in Motion came out with this ungodly thing called a BlackBerry. It looks more like a TV remote that needs to go to Weight Watchers, but that's what it was. And so people started texting, and man, if you had a BlackBerry, you could afford one, you were sexy. You guys are about 3 years old at this time. 20-year-old guy, when you're 8, launches a very small startup called Facebook that has had some moderate success. All right, when you're 28-year-old Stephen Chan, when you're 9 years old, YouTube hits the thing. Jack Dorsey, Twitter comes out when you're 10 years old. When you're 11, the world tilted because touch technology became standard. So for those of you that are graduating and you were around 11 years old when the iPhone was released, if you were a freshman, you were about 7. But for all intents and purposes, there's never been a day in your adultish life that you haven't had touch technology. It's changed everything. 27-year-old guy, a few years later, Instagram hits, Snapchat hits in 2011. 2011, again, Siri is introduced, and this is huge. Artificial intelligence now is in our pockets, and we find ourselves talking to our phones rather than talking into our phones. You get to, you're 15 at the time, okay? Twitch is launched, and this is something I didn't see coming, but a time where people would pay money to watch other people play virtual games, not real games, but virtual games. So you're about 15 years old, multi-billion-dollar platform. Alexa comes out when you're 18 years old, you're 20. Google Assistant comes out, and here we are in the present. There's a guy named Tyler Blevins. Some of you probably already know him. His screen name is Ninja. He makes $530,000 a month playing Fortnite in his home. And I put down here that this is the birth or the launching of a virtual man, and I'm not throwing Tyler under the bus. I've watched my grandson play Fortnite, and it's I can't even keep up with his fingers. You know, I'm still working on getting a doorbell right, and he's got all this other stuff going. But there's been a change in the sense that there's a man that's being paid to produce nothing. There is no goods or services. There is nothing that has any real existence that's coming out of it, and he's being paid $6 million a year. And it's not like I want $6 million a year. I'm saying, the universe has shifted. And people look at that and say, well, that's just. No, it's not just. You understand where we've gone and where we've come. we've got a whole lot of stuff that we need to look back on. All right? So, the world has changed. Yeah, got that. The big thing I wanted to show you is that if you take a look at the spread of all this change, but really the main stuff that's happened has happened in your lifetime. And it's happened so fast that people are kind of spinning in circles trying to stay focused. And so one of the things that's really happened for you that's different, I'm just telling you this. I've been paying attention and studying culture. I've written books on it for the last 35 years. You guys your whole world has become centrifugal. And by that I simply mean that if you've ever been on a merry-go-round, anyone ever been on a merry-go-round? Okay, that's really cool because they banned them in playgrounds. They're too dangerous. Children get hurt. And pain should have nothing to do with childhood. So we've gotten rid of teeter-totters and merry-go-rounds, and we have rubber rocks, and we have helmets the size of small Volkswagens that kids have to wear for everything they do. So, but centrifugal means that you're pushed out from the center. And life for you, you're the first generation, beloved. Life for you is like this. It's always spinning. There's so much to manage. It's one of the reasons, and the really smart people say this, it's one of the reasons why your generation struggles more with discouragement and depression than previous generations. And I get that. It's like trying to juggle eggs. And you're told to move forward. You're told to move forward with your life without having any kind of center that everything is connected to. And so you're trying to hold on and keep things from spinning off the merry-go-round and move forward at the same time. And people outside the community of faith are saying some stuff to us, and they're deeply concerned about what's happening to us as persons and what's happening to us as a race of people. And so what I want to spend some time doing, and I'm going to fly through this as quickly as I can and wrap up. And I told you we're going into the dark, and we're going to step into it right now. We're going to take a look at what they're saying and what they're seeing. All right, now I'm going to do something. It's real important that you hear me when I say this, because some of you are in marketing classes, some of you are in education classes. I'm about to do something that you've been told to never do. But I want you to know that I do know that you've been told that, and I'm going to do it anyway. All right, just so you know that. I'm going to put some citations up here, and I'm going to read them. And I know you can read, and you've been told, don't dumb down your audience because they know how to read. Don't insult them. Well, I'm also an educator, and I also know that the more of your senses I can engage in any learning activity, the greater the likelihood is that you'll recall it. So I'm going to read them while you read them, and we're going to say, what are these people saying? What are they saying? What are these lips of foreigners saying to us, about us? And many of them are saying that as a human race, we're becoming more and more shallow. We're becoming more and more shallow. Look at this statement from Amusing Ourselves to Death. Now, beloved, this is 1987. Orwell's 1984. Control Society. Huxley's Happy and Distracted Soma. All right? What Orwell feared were those that would ban books. What Huxley feared was that there would be no reason to ban a book, for there would be no one who wanted to read one. Orwell feared that the truth would be concealed from us. Huxley feared the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance. Orwell feared we would become a captive culture. Huxley feared we would become a trivial culture. I've got book title after book title after book title of people that are saying that, this is serious. Chris Hedges has written a book called Empires of Illusion. And he believes that we are slowly becoming a soft culture, a culture that can't handle pain, can't handle difficulty, personal difficulty, gets offended when people say things to us that we don't agree with, that we pull away from conflict, we pull away from disruptive ideas, we draw back from genuine dialogue because I don't like what I'm hearing. I don't like what you're saying. I don't agree with what you're saying. I would rather escape someplace where it's safe. And he says that we're becoming a culture that's more concerned about recreation than reality. Here's what he says. He says, the more we sever ourselves from a literate, print-based culture, a world of complexity and nuance, a world of ideas, for one informed by comforting, reassuring images, fantasies, slogans, celebrities, and a lust for violence, the more we are destined to implode. As the collapse continues and our suffering mounts, we yearn, listen to this, we yearn like World Wrestling Entertainment fans or those who confuse pornography for love. For the comfort, reassurance, and beauty of illusion, the illusion makes us feel good. It is its own reality. The worse reality becomes, the less a beleaguered population wants to hear about it. He says, we're becoming soft. We're becoming a culture that can't handle disagreement and pain. They're also saying, and this is true, I know this is true, that we're becoming a culture that relates face to face less and less. And we're going to talk tomorrow about why this is such a significant thing. All right? Brett Robinson wrote a book called Appletopia, The Religious Imagination of Steve Jobs. It's a wonderful book. And here's what he says. The age of electric media is the age of discarnate man, persons communicating without bodies. From the disembodied voice on the telephone to the faceless email messages, electronic communication trades human presence for efficiency. And we are, beloved, we are becoming a race of people, a culture of people that relates pixel to pixel more than face to face. You see it in the store. My wife and I have gone out on a date every week for 43 years, and we go out to eat, and it's just heartbreaking to see people. And I'm just telling you this. I don't know a person our age that's picked up an iPhone that hasn't consumed them. And truth be told, I think people in their 50s and 60s are on their devices more than you guys are. Some of you know that to be true. But we're losing the ability to communicate. You have got to learn now how to look across the table at someone and talk to them like they're really there and you're really listening. Because if you don't, you will never have a lasting relationship that will carry you into the future. And there's a reason for that. We're going to look at that tomorrow. They're also saying that we've become a networked culture, highly networked culture, characterized by loneliness, isolation, and depression. 30-year veteran, you guys, 30-year veteran from MIT, her name is Sherry Turkle, has written a book called Alone Together, Why We Expect More from Technology and Less from Each Other. And Sherry Turkle says this, technology promises to let us do anything from anywhere with anyone, but it also drains us as we try to do everything everywhere. We begin to feel overwhelmed and depleted by the lives technology makes possible. We may be free to work from anywhere, but we are also prone to being lonely everywhere. In a surprising twist, relentless connection leads to a new solitude. And so what? So we are alone together. We are alone together. In short, what? In short, humanity is becoming less and less personal. Less and less personal. Maggie Jackson has written a book called Distracted. This is my last quote. So who are we becoming as we play God to the machine and face a future of sharing our earth with mechanical creatures that we can create, love, and nurture? The question is entangled in another way with the fate of the machine. Put simply, as machines seemingly become more human, we are becoming in many ways more like our machines. And I could talk to you for the rest of the night and all day tomorrow about a bunch of stuff that most of you aren't aware of that's happening in the area of sex and robots and people trying to get laws passed that you can marry a robot. And you think I'm crazy, but it's redefine personhood and you redefine marriage in 2015. Those two roads will converge at some time. I will be gone, but they will converge. As outlandish as it seems to you, they will converge. All right, so let's take a look back real quickly. We're going to take a kind of a summary. Some of the things that we've been looking at, all right? We're devolving. We're not evolving. We're evolving into a species as we become servants to the toys we think we've mastered. We become servants to the toys we think we've mastered. You know, if it chirps, vibrates, or rings, or lights up, it draws my attention. There are people in this room. I'm telling you this because I love you. There's people in this room that cannot sleep if your phone's not in your room. Cannot sleep if your phone's not under your pillow. Can't live without it. And when we get to that place, if a person couldn't live without a substance of some kind, we would say there's an issue there. And I do this. I am not up here talking to you down there. We're in this together. All right? I mean, do you find yourself reaching into your pocket to take your phone off for no apparent reason? Has that ever happened? Or reach into your purse and take your phone off? Why is that? And they're telling us this. They're telling us this. And we're going to talk more about this tomorrow. We've moved from stationary talkers to nomadic texters. We are constantly moving. I mean, there's tons of funny videos about people falling into fountains and falling downstairs, and really sad ones of getting hit by cars. I mean, there are so many people, seriously, so many people getting killed by cars, texting. And a smartphone is really an interesting thing to have in the hand of a dumb person if you're going to walk out in front of a car while you're texting. Just think of this, because you are intelligent and smart people. I know that. We are losing the virtue of curiosity. I'm watching it leave, where we don't know how to ask people open-ended, sequential questions that would lead to a conversation. We've become a culture of serial monologuers, and most of it's self-promoting. I send you something, you send me something back. I send you something, you send me something back. We're losing the ability to carry on a conversation. All right? We're becoming more comfortable with pixels than with people. People are messy. Relationships are messy. Long distance is better. Anonymity is better. I'm more comfortable with that. We found ourselves, according to Sherry Turkle, alone together. And basically, biblically, beloved, we are on a trajectory that's taking us further and further from our original design. It ignores it or rejects it, either ignorant of it or it doesn't care. And we're going to talk about resign, our design tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to spend some time looking at this question. Is there any word from God? Has God said anything about this stuff? And if so, what can we get from this? Oh man, I'm pretty sure that some of you were a little overwhelmed by what you just heard. Maybe even a little ticked off, I'm not sure. But to be honest, I have to tell you, I hope you were, in a sense. But more than that, I hope that you'd have an open heart to what we're going to be talking about next week, namely whether or not the Bible has anything to say about what we're becoming as people. Until then, let me give you something to think about. There was a time when God's people were in a very dark place. They were exiles in Babylon after their temple had been destroyed and their entire Jewish history, in their minds, had been eradicated. And here's what he said to them while they were there. He said this. He said, "Seek the welfare of the city where I've sent you into exile and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare." And here's the crazy thing. It's an amazing thing. Our English word welfare that shows up 3 times in that verse, all 3 times of it, is the Hebrew word shalom. I mean, that's right. God told his people to seek to make things the way they're supposed to be, where they are, even in difficult times and in difficult spaces. And that in the process, things would become the way they're supposed to be for them. Beloved, a modern application for you this week, in light of everything we've just listened to, is to be all there, wherever you are, when you're with people. It's shalomic. It's what God wants. See you next week.